Here's a question I think some people, if you're a wrestling fan, need to ask yourself. And that is, what if? What if, indeed, TNA goes out of business in the near future? Let's say in the next 6 months. Let's give them that. What happens? What happens to the wrestling business as a whole? Well, there are some that believe that when TNA goes, WWE will suffer. I don't think so. See, WWE pretty much is still going to have a bit of competition in the near future. Whether you believe it or not, they will. And it will be in the form of Ring of Honor. And if it ever gets off the ground, Global Force Wrestling. And you also have to remember, they've got a situation going on right now with AAA. And AAA's got a new program coming on El Rey's network. And one of the highlights for them to have that El Rey's network and that show on there is the fact that they will have people like Del Rio, the original Sin Cara, Chavo Guerrero, and possibly in the future Rey Mysterio, all showing up on that program. And then as far as Ring of Honor goes, Ring of Honor pretty much is gathering up people that TNA has let go that has potential to still get it done in that ring. People like Bad Influence. News has broke that they're getting Matt Sydal, a.k.a. Evan Bourne, back. The list could go on. But this is only if TNA goes out of business within the next 6 months. Should that happen. But I still believe TNA's got a shot. And here's why I believe that. Here's why I believe TNA still has a shot of some kind. You see, there are discussions still going on that TNA could end up someplace else. Now, according to several sources, Spike TV is doing whatever it takes to help TNA get a new network. Now, the question is, who will that be? Well, apparently the lead candidate right now is Discovery Network's Velocity channel. Now, some might look at this as a positive, others might look at it as a negative. The positive would be that Impact Wrestling and TNA would still have some place to go and have a place for the programming to be seen. The negative side, although, according to several sources, is that if TNA goes with this deal with Velocity Channel, that they will have to cut back drastically on a lot of production and even roster, to the point that, as one source put it, TNA wouldn't even be the TNA we now know. It would be completely different. But there are still possibilities out there. As I've mentioned before, and I still believe this to be a huge option for them, they can basically get themselves on YouTube. They can. They can put themselves on YouTube. And here's why. One, when TNA, let's remember this. History lesson here. History lesson. Let's remember this. When TNA was transitioning from Fox Sports to Spike, they were off the air television-wise for quite some time here in the States. However, Impact Wrestling was still going on, not just on an international television basis, but through the internet. ImpactWrestling.com would broadcast their shows. Or TNA Wrestling would broadcast the Impact shows. The same can be done again through sources like YouTube, Dailymotion, Vimeo, and the list goes on. Blimp.tv, the list goes on. TNA can work with one of these internet video sites, and it will and can be done. It's true. It can be. And that would still help TNA in a sense because, one, from a financial standpoint, they'd still be able to keep the roster they have, probably still be able to have the production they have, and it wouldn't cost them that much to be broadcast on YouTube. It wouldn't cost them that much to be broadcast on Vimeo, Dailymotion, Blimp, you name it. They can even try to work something out with Netflix. I think somebody asked Jeff Siegel one time on one of his Q&As if another wrestling program can be shown and done or could be broadcast or done through a site like Netflix. And I think Jeff said that it is entirely possible. So there are options there. Now, I can understand, though, why TNA and fans of TNA would want them to get on regular television, or at least get a major television deal, some kind of a television deal, because they feel more people could watch it. But the problem is this. TNA needs to find a network that is willing to take them at a price in a deal that works for both sides. Some say the Velocity situation will not work because it's HD channel only, and it's not broadcast in that many homes right now. But again, this is what I'm talking about, going back to that philosophy, going back to the whole internet deal. If they make a deal with a company like Google, YouTube, or Dailymotion, or Netflix, or Blimp, or Vimeo, whoever, to get Impact broadcast, or at least seen on the video websites, people will tune in. I mean, look, YouTube would probably be the best option they got right now, because YouTube still ends up broadcasting a lot of their one night only pay-per-views and stuff that people pay about $7.99 for, or $14.99 for, and then later on, maybe 24 to 48 hours later, they upload, and for about the same price as what you would pay on regular pay-per-view, you could watch the most recent pay-per-view on the YouTube channel. So what would be the big deal if they decided, hey, we're going to put Impact on here now? There wouldn't be no big deal. There wouldn't be. And to me, that makes YouTube the best destination for them if they cannot get another network deal done, or if they can't get something worked out with Spike to remain on there. I mean, think about it this way, folks. Think about it this way. TNA, whether we like them or not, has been picking up the ball lately. Yes, they have dropped the ball so far that in the eyes of some, it doesn't look like they're going to be able to catch back up. They're going to be able to really rebuild from what they have lost. They're not going to be able to rebuild from what they have lost. And that might be true. Some say that when WCW started picking up the ball, it was too late for them too. And I agree. But here's the situation. TNA can also go into syndication as well. That's another option. Look at Ring of Honor. Ring of Honor is in syndication, and they're doing good. Ring of Honor is doing good, and they're in syndication. I have not heard any problems with Ring of Honor. TNA could follow the same direction. They could follow the same deal. And I guarantee you this, TNA might get on more syndicated networks than what Ring of Honor is on right now, because they're more nationally known than Ring of Honor. As crazy as that sounds, they're more nationally known than Ring of Honor. And I believe, in a sense, that could help out too. So you got all these options, like I say, these online video options that they could work with, all these online video sites like YouTube, Netflix, Blimp, Dailymotion, Vimeo. The possibility they could get a deal with this Velocity network maybe, or one of the Discovery networks. Who knows? Maybe staying back, maybe there's a chance they'll stay on Spike for another year or so. Who knows? But there's also that possibility of doing syndication. And syndication can help out on a broad scale. Again, just like with YouTube and online stuff, they wouldn't have to worry about paying that much. They'd be able to broadcast their show on whatever night they can work it, you know? And you got all these networks out there. You got like, let's see. You got these like these me networks. You could work with them. You got the me networks, if you will. You got the antenna networks. These are places that a majority of houses have that can really benefit from having something like Spike TV on them. I mean, not Spike TV, but TNA on them. It's possible. It's really possible. And yeah, it might be a different variety of times, maybe, if that's what they got to do. Then fine, go ahead and do it. I mean, they could work something out with the CW, for all you know. Yeah, think about it. CW used to have WWE, used to have SmackDown, and that was somewhat of a hit for them. So why not bring Spike TV? Why not bring Spike TV's? Not Spike TV, but why not bring TNA Impact to that same audience? You can have TNA Impact going like, yeah, well, we're doing Wednesday nights, and that works out great because there's no interference with anybody. And we're probably the more watched show. It would work out perfectly. See, there's all these options that TNA has to look at, network and online-wise and syndicated-wise, in the next, I guess, next 4 months before the deal officially ends with Spike TV. But then it brings us back to the question of what happens. What happens if that indeed occurs? What happens if TNA goes out of business within, let's say, 2 months after this deal runs out? Because you got October, November, you've got the rest of this month. You've got October, you've got November, you've got December. That's 3 months. 2 months that's a 2-month extension from the original deal expiring, and then you add 3 more months, January, February, March, which means lockdown could be it, right? They got all the way potentially up to March maybe to stay alive. Could they get something done before then? Absolutely. But what happens if they don't? Well, I will say this. Expect a possible expect a possible deja vu moment to happen at the beginning of lockdown. Just expect that. Expect a deja vu moment to happen at the start of lockdown that we basically would have seen by that time 16 years prior. Yeah, expect something like that. Expect something like that, and I guarantee you that would be your answer to TNA's future. Would another invasion angle come out of it? Probably not. Where would a lot of these established TNA stars and knockouts go? I tell you where they'll go. If some of them are talented enough, that company, and I think we all know which company I'm talking about, could send them to their developmental territory and show and into the performance center to get better at what they're doing, as well as learn the ways of how wrestling is done and how sports entertainment is done in that company. Or the latter could be a lot of them could go bye-bye. You understand what company I'm talking about. I mean, come on. WWE, yeah, pretty much it's an obvious indication of who I'm talking about. But like I said, that's a strong possibility. I'm not saying it's going to happen in the next 6 months or so, but if nothing works out, I wouldn't be surprised that the start of lockdown is similar to the start of the last Nitro in 2001. You know, it would even make that even more of an icing on the cake of that happening, of deja vu happening all over again, if not another way of topping that. You can have freaking Dixie Carter come out on television and then say, I bring in the new owner of TNA, here comes Vince McMahon, shakes his hand. I mean, there you go. That could happen. That could happen if TNA goes out of business within the next 6 months. That's the strong possibility. Now, you could probably say, well, Jeff Jarrett still has some stake in the company. Maybe he'll buy it. And that's true. Jeff Jarrett could do that, and he can integrate what's left of TNA's roster and values and all that into GFW if it's already off the ground by then. If it's already going, then he can basically take what's left of TNA roster and all that wise, put him into GFW, possibly out of the goodness of his heart, bring Dixie in and say, and not in a presidential role or an ownership role, but just have in a learning role, like, okay, this is how you do it. This is how you run a company. I wouldn't be surprised by that either. So those are two options of what could happen to TNA should they go out of business. They could either go through deja vu, like we as fans could go through deja vu like we did 15 years prior, or Jeff Jarrett could assume that role and basically take control back of TNA and integrate what's left of it into GFW. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised by that. But either scenario. Now, here's the other thing though. If neither scenario was to happen and TNA just quietly went away, went out of business, what happens to the stars and the talents? What happens to them? Well, I can guarantee you this, WWE, whether they want to admit it or not, they're keeping their eye out on people. WWE is indeed keeping their eye out on people. So is GFW, so is Ring of Honor. These companies, along with New Japan and All Japan, they're all keeping AAA, CMLL, they're all keeping their eyes on these talents. They're all keeping their eyes on these talents. And I guarantee you, certain talents will end up in certain areas. New Japan, I guarantee you, is looking at Sonata. And if TNA goes out of business, they're going to want to snatch up Sonata. They are. James Storm, depending on how old he is and if he could still go in this ring, James Storm, he'll probably end up in either GFW or Ring of Honor or WWE. He might even get a crackdown in AAA or CMLL or even All Japan or New Japan. But to me, the top areas for him would be Ring of Honor, GFW, or WWE. And I think WWE could be a top contention or a top prospect area for him to go to. The same with Bobby Roode or Robert Roode. Here's a guy that some might say is kind of like the Triple H of TNA right now because of very similar mannerisms. Here's a guy that WWE could take, put him in NXT for a little bit, groom him more to be like a WWE superstar, bring him in, and because of similarities, you could pass him off as Triple H's freaking storyline brother, as Stephanie McMahon's brother-in-law. Say, here's Bobby Helmsley, or Bobby Roode. Here's Robert Roode. Here's Double R, Robert Roode. There you go. That would be perfect. That would be perfect. Then again, he can also establish himself in Ring of Honor as a top guy. Kenny King. Here's a top cruiserweight X Division guy. I look at him and I see a guy that could end up back in Ring of Honor. You could send him back to. He can go back to Ring of Honor. Maybe reignite a feud with, who was it? Adam Cole. Maybe you could play the history on the fact that Kenny left him high and dry and Cole wants revenge. Or you could send Kenny King down to, or Kenny King can end up to going to WWE and end up in the NXT program for a while, then get called up to the main roster. There's your potential there. MVP, well, here's the guy that WWE could say, okay, MVP, you still have some life in you, let's bring you back. And they could bring him back. Or MVP could end up back in New Japan, or in GFW, or All Japan, or potentially Ring of Honor. But the most likely scenario could be either New Japan or WWE. Tigre Uno. Here's a guy that's AAA material all the way. Could end up going back there. Could end up going to CMLL. Heck, he could even go to New Japan or All Japan. But if I'm WWE and I'm focusing on the future, I think Tigre Uno is going to be someone they're going to try to pick up on next. I wouldn't be surprised by that. Yeah. Samoa Joe. Now here's one that a lot of people are wondering. What's going to happen with Samoa Joe? No doubt. Two top areas that he's going to end up in. 2 areas. Ring of Honor he could end up going back to, or WWE he's going to go to. And I guarantee you a lot of people are going to hope WWE. And I don't blame them. I do not blame them. Now what about the knockouts? What about the knockouts? Well, here's something. You got Gail Kim, who has pretty much burned her bridge with WWE so many times it's not funny. Although she's a very talented athlete and one of my personal favorite women wrestlers in the world. Here's a girl, like I said, has burned her bridge with WWE one too many times that I don't think WWE would be in too much of a hurry to bring her back. I could see her possibly going to Ring of Honor to try to start up a ROH women's division, or go and be part of Shimmer. She could be part of that because they're associated with Ring of Honor. Or she can go to All Japan or New Japan and wrestle there. Or she could end up in AAA because they got a women's division there. And there you go. Perfect fit. I just don't think WWE is going to be a top option right off the bat for her. I really don't. I think more along the lines, like I said, I think the top areas for her would be Shimmer / Ring of Honor because of the connections, AAA, CMLL, and New Japan. Those would be the top 4 areas I think Gail Kim could excel at should TNA go out of business in the next 6 months. The beautiful people. What happens to Velvet and Angelina? Well, here are 2 girls that both were part of WWE's developmental system years ago. Here are 2 ladies that I think now that they have enough experience could end up back in WWE. And they could end up in the NXT system for a little bit. Then they could end up back on and then they can end up probably in short time on the main roster because they're that good. And they got a potential of divas they could feud with. You can bring the beautiful people in as who they are together because people would know who they are. And you can even acknowledge, yeah, they were part of this company known as TNA and that's where they made a name for themselves and blah, blah, blah. You could bring them in. And like I said, they got a variety of divas they could feud with currently on the main roster, that are currently on the main roster, and some that are going to be on the main roster by the time they would get there. I mean, think about it. You could have the Slayers, Layla and Summer Rae. Think about a feud between those 2 and the beautiful people. That'd be something. Wouldn't you think? Angelina, she's a good in-ring performer. Imagine her in a feud with Paige or AJ. Heck, if you decide to reunite the Bella twins, which apparently is going to happen, we just don't know when, you could have the Bellas against the beautiful people. You'll bring in Charlotte up real soon, have her feud with them, or heck, even have her align herself with them. Who knows? You know? I mean, the possibilities are endless. Then you got Madison Rayne. I think WWE might give her a chance, but then again, with her being a mother and all that, and possibly wanting to have more children, she could be on the, like, we're not really sure, but I'm not going to rule out WWE as a possibility for her. So I look at her going there. She might even try AAA, but I think more along the lines if she's WWE bound. Jessica Havoc, the new girl that's just arrived, the girl that's known for her time in Women's Superstars Unleashed and CZW. Here's a girl that I truly believe is WWE bound. I really do. She is WWE bound. And I guarantee this. She'll end up in NXT for a little bit, and then she'll be brought right up to that main roster, and I guarantee you that'll change a lot of the Divas division. And just imagine the possibilities of matchups there with Havoc involved. Havoc against AJ, Havoc against Paige, Havoc and Naomi. The list, and then the potential of divas and NXT that'll be called up. Bayley, Charlotte, Sasha. The list is endless. And like I said, the possibilities are endless with them. So don't be surprised by that. Taryn Tyrell. Now here's somebody that, like Gail Kim, is possibly could be on the outs a little bit for a while with WWE. So I would look at Taryn Tyrell to probably follow Gail Kim to Shimmer and Ring of Honor, and maybe AAA and New Japan. That's why I see she could end up being. I really do. I really do see that as a possibility. Don't think it's not, because it is. And if there's any other knockouts I'm not thinking of right now, I apologize. Tessmacher, I think she could be ending up back in WWE, because she really didn't burn those many bridges as far as I know. Who else? Brittany, what's her name in outside? It's Garrett something. She could end up there. I think Brittany's WWE bound. So that's all. Like I said, this is all could happen if TNA goes out of business. These are people I think are bound to go to these certain areas. Tag team wise, oh boy, what do you do with the Wolves? Simple. Wolves go back to Ring of Honor. True. Or the Wolves can end up in GFW if it's up and going by then. Or they can end up in New Japan or All Japan or AAA or CMLL. Top areas, I believe, Ring of Honor, most likely, AAA, and New Japan. Do I see WWE showing an interest? Yeah, but not that much because of what happened doing the one shot on NXT. But you never know. But the three that I mentioned are the top areas I think the Wolves could end up in. I really do. What about the Hardys and Team 3D? I think they're both WWE bound. I hate to say it. I know people don't want to hear that, but yeah, they're basically WWE bound. I wouldn't be surprised if the Hardys do kind of make a run at Ring of Honor. I wouldn't be surprised by that. Let them go to Ring of Honor, possibly give them a run with the tag titles before they go back to WWE. There you go. That could work too. Or you can have them go to New Japan and they could become champions there. So I wouldn't be surprised. But I think the top areas for both teams are WWE. Ring of Honor is a possibility for both as a second option, but I think WWE is the most likely for the four. The Bros Bands, I think they'll end up in WWE, but mostly in the NXT program for a while. Same with DJ Zema Ion. I think he'll end up there. EC3, I would guess, could be WWE bound again. I would have to say he's WWE bound again. I think he'll end up back in TNA. Not TNA, but I think he'll end up back in NXT for a while. So I would say he's going back. Rockstar Spud, I think is more of Ring of Honor bound, just for that fact. Or he could be WWE bound as a comedic role. So those would be the two areas. EC3, like I said, could end up back in WWE's NXT program. Possibly ROH could be another option for him as well. Let's see. Rhino, I would say maybe he's going to go to Japan. Maybe he'll be back in WWE. Those would be the two areas I would look at. Austin Aries, no doubt WWE wants to get their hands on him, so I guess he's WWE bound, because he's associated with himself with them when he's done little scans and stuff for the game. So, yeah, I think Aries is WWE bound. He'll probably end up in NXT for a little bit, then on the main roster. But he'll be one of those that'll be in NXT for a short time, and then he'll end up on the main roster. I know there's some other people. Eric Young. I don't know about Eric. I'd say maybe he's WWE bound. But I think he's going to be more Ring of Honor bound than anything. So Ring of Honor is going to be above WWE for Eric Young, if anything happens. So, yeah, just and along with anybody else, they got Manic, I think is going to end up probably in WWE, but under the developmental system for a little bit. So, yeah, I would definitely say that these are the directions I would say these are the directions a lot of these stars could end up in. A lot of the places the stars and knockouts of TNA can end up going if TNA goes out of business within the next 6 months. Kurt Angle, I know a lot of people want to know about him. I would say Kurt's probably going to end up back in WWE, but on a very part-time basis, limited part-time basis, and mostly like a trainer or something at the Performance Center as well. So, but that's basically my thoughts. That's only if. Now, let me remind people, that's only if TNA goes out of business in the next 6 months. If they don't, then none of this is going to happen. If they do, expect it to happen and possibly expect deja vu to strike once again as it did 15 years prior within the next 6 months. But again, it all depends on if TNA doesn't get a deal with another network like Velocity, Syndication, CW, wherever. If they don't get something going, maybe with an internet video online site like YouTube, Netflix, Blimp, Vimeo, Dailymotion, stuff like that. That's only if none of that happens, that this is what could happen to TNA in the next 6 months if they go out of business in the next 6 months. They could get bought by WWE. A lot of the stars can either get bought by WWE, either bought up by Jeff Jarrett and the stake he still has in the company, or they could just quietly go out of business. And these could be the destinations, organizations, and promotions that a lot of these stars and knockouts could end up going to, if that happens. But let me know what you think. And yes, I do believe maybe WWE will buy TNA's library. I do believe that's got to happen because they're the only ones that will have the money to do that. So anyway, and I do believe they'll probably end up buying the rights to the pay-per-view names too. Just an opinion. Now remember, this is just all opinion. But this is only if they don't get a network deal happening in the by the end of the year. And if they're out of business within the next 6 months. So let me know what you guys think down below. Again, remember, this is just opinion based. And I will talk to you all later. God bless. Take care. I'm out.